Good afternoon and welcome to AHCC Talk, the show dedicated to helping home health and hospice providers keep up to date on the documentation, diagnosis coding, OASIS, and HOPE assessment data collection issues that matter most in home health and hospice. AHCC Talk aims to bring you closer to reliable experts in home health and hospice and to share the latest news and information from the industry and from the Association of Home Care Coding and Compliance. I'm Jan Milliman, Director for AHCC, and I'm happy to be hosting today's program. This afternoon, we're talking about the Hospice Hope tool. And now I'd like to introduce our industry guests for this episode. Today we have, oh my goodness, I didn't update this slide, apologies. Nanette and everyone, this is Nanette Minton. She's our AHCC Advisory Board Vice Chair, and she'll be joining us today. Thanks for joining us, Nanette.
No problem, Jan. I'll just tell everybody to email Sharon with all their questions and it'll be good.
Perfect. That'll be a nice surprise for Sharon.
No, I'm just so I'm glad to be here today. I want this to be somewhat of an informal talk. For those of
Oh, Nina, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, guys. All kinds of technical issues today. Huh? Okay, so the goal of this segment is really just to give you, a brief overview of some of the information. Certainly, there are those of us who have been diving deep into this to provide agency education, and some other people may not have even had a chance to look at it or think about how that's going to affect them. So let's just talk about it. So the HOPE tool is called the Hospice Outcomes and Patient Evaluation Tool. It is part of the Hospice Final Rule. It's been a long time coming, and although it was finalized in the 2025 Final Rule, obviously it's not going to go into effect until October 1st, this October 1st of 2025. Jen, you can move to the next slide. And so, to understand what this tool is going to fully replace the HIS. It is going to be required for all patients, regardless of payer or age, and it will require up to 4 visits per patient, depending on the length of stay. So generally, for a patient who's been on service for at least 30 days, technically 17 days, they're going to have additional visits that are going to coincide with HOPE completion. Now, these HOPE visits, let's talk a little bit about this. We're going to kind of sit on this slide for a while because I want to talk about these visits and then just give you a little brief overview of the major changes between the HIS and the HOPE. So just like we have now, instead of the HIS, we're going to have the HOPE, and it's going to be done in the first 5 days of admission election of the hospice. The HOPE update visit, these are different. You've got an HUV visit 1 and an HUV visit 2. The first one is going to be done between day 6 and 15, and the second between day 16 and 30. And then you've got the HOPE discharge visit for that 4th visit. So let's talk a little bit about the tool, about some of the changes that have been seen and what they're looking at in this. So one of the things they did under the A section is on the site of service at admission, they've kind of removed some language, made that a little more clear and cleaner when you're trying to answer this question. And then for option 6, they added GIP for clarity on that. So it was good that they did some clarification on this particular section. On the admission, the AO250 question, they have updated, of course, the reason for the record, adding those hospice update visits 1 and 2. And then we also have under A1000, that was deleted and replaced with a separate standardized patient assessment data elements under ethnicity and race. So they just moved that around. One of the other things looking at this, they added a new standard under the patient assessment data element, which has been adopted by other PAC settings approved for inclusion in hospice. So this is, what is your preferred language, and do you need an interpreter, need or want an interpreter to communicate with a doctor or healthcare staff? So again, they're standardizing a lot of this language, trying to bring it all full circle. Let's see, so they changed A1802 to A1805 to align with admitted from data elements from the long-term LTCH and SNF PAC settings. So again, they're just trying to really align some of this information. And then response 09, hospice home / non-institutional, and 12, home under the care of organized home health service organization, were removed. That because CMS said that 01 would suffice for both, since the patient would still be at home in the community setting. So that was kind of nice to have that clarified and removed. So we've got new data elements for living arrangements and availability of assistance. So we'll see those. They changed the reason for discharge to single-digit response codes. And then the original, I want to spend a second on this. So on under admission, I0010, principal diagnosis, they this original data element was there, but they've expanded it to check all that apply list for comorbidities and coexisting conditions that have been added. So it's really important to pay attention to this. It's important for us to do the data collection correctly, to gather all the information as appropriate, because although this does not affect payment now, we know in the future it very likely will, as has happened with other providers and other settings. And so the best thing we can do is to be as up to date and as accurate as we can, so that CMS is making decisions on real data and not sloppy data. That being said, again, hospices, the reimbursement does not change based on the diagnosis, but I would expect to see, if you have obviously the principal diagnosis, but all comorbidities or coexisting diagnosis, that you would expect to see a coinciding ICD-10 code on your claim for that comorbidity or that principal diagnosis, obviously. So be aware of that. So I'm really glad to see that. They've added a new data element, and this one is J0050, death is imminent. So at the time of this assessment, and based on your clinical assessment, does a patient appear to have a life expectancy of 3 days or less? And the answer is yes or no. And this is to be answered on the admission and the HUV time points. We've got a new data element for neuropathic pain to be answered on admission. And under J2040, treatment for shortness of breath, option C has been, when it says the type of treatment initiated, that has been eliminated since it was not really being used in the quality management. We've got a new data element about symptom impact to screening. And then again, symptom impact. So have we screened for it? What's the impact? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but definitely you need to be aware to look at that, make sure we're thoroughly assessing, managing, answering, and following those skip patterns for sure. We've got a new data element on skin conditions, types of skin conditions, skin and ulcer injury treatments. And then they added the scheduled opioid N0500. They've added those to the hospice update visit time points. And they've done that also to the PRN opioids and to the bowel regimen. And then, of course, we've got the new data element Z0350, indicating when the date the assessment was completed for the HUV time point visits. So that really gives you a good, just a very brief, hurriedly overview of all of those things. So let's, Jan, if you want to move to the next slide, let's talk just a minute. So you know, obviously this is implementation date is October 1st. Public reporting and outcome scoring will not be affected until fiscal year 2028. But remember, we need to start now. They're going to look at the data. We need to get good at it. And then, like, I believe it's a year, I don't have that pulled up in front of me, a year prior to that, you know, they're going to be pulling the data way prior to that reporting and outcome scoring date. So we want to be sure that we're looking at those appropriately. So the other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, HOPE submission has to be done. You can move to the next page, Jan. Has to be done within 30 days of the event or completion date. Okay, again, we've got admission, discharge, and up to 2 visit dates. And if we've not done that according to that completion date, if we fail to meet those submission requirements, just like we did for the HOPE, I mean, for the HIS, then you're going to have a 4% payment reduction, you know, in your annual percentage update. So this tool obviously is expected to be a part of your Hospice Quality Reporting Program. It's going to have those same compliance standards, and you have to follow those timeframes. Now, the next thing I want to briefly talk about are the HOPE-based quality process measures. And so there's a couple of measures on the next slide, Jan. We'll talk about timely reassessment of pain and timely reassessment of non-pain. So this measures how many patients who are assessed with moderate or severe pain or non-pain impact that were reassessed within 2 calendar days. Severity and impact, obviously based on those HOPE assessments. And the non-pain symptoms they're looking at include shortness of breath, anxiety, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and agitation. Now, I wanted to read, pull this over here so I can get this information to you. So, you know, really those quality measures and the purpose of those is to really look at the data and how that's measured and collected by the clinicians. You know, they can tell a lot about the length of stay, how somebody progressing, what's happening with the patient, and really looking at, you know, if during a visit there's evidence of ongoing symptom issues, then what are we doing about that? How are we providing that better care plan? So it gives us rather a tool to think through what we're doing for those patients and how we can tangibly document that. Now, be really careful that you're not assessing a patient or marking those answers based on maybe what the patient states. We know many times as clinicians, what's actually happening and what the patient states are two different things. So again, we want to give ourselves credit for what's happening. We want to make sure that our documentation supports that clinical diagnosis and prognosis and eligibility, because if we don't, we're going to set ourselves up for failure. If you have a patient that, you know, you're admitting, and you very rarely ever have a patient that needs further follow-up from this HOPE update visit, then you might be thinking about what is the population of my patient? What is happening with these patients? Am I providing, you know, am I bringing patients on a little too early? Or are they very sick and I need to provide some education with my staff regarding how they're answering these questions? And again, you know, equating this a little bit, it's apples to oranges, but regarding the beginning process of how OASIS came about and how that has transformed and changed everything in the home care industry for those home health agencies, it's definitely something we need to be aware of and think about. So let's see. So let's talk a second about exclusions. So when do I not have to do these stated visits or this HOPE assessment? And so basically, if the patient dies or is discharged within 2 days, the reassessment visit is refused. They're unable to contact or locate the patient. Patient is in the ER, hospital, or traveling outside the service area. So interestingly, I wanted to point out as well, I don't know if any of you have seen the fast fact that CMS put out in July here recently regarding potential fraud and abuse. It's specifically related to hospice. It's just a one-page document, and it goes through and talks about, you know, explaining the overview of what hospice is, comprehensive holistic plan, and that, you know, when the beneficiary elects hospice, they waive curative treatment. So it kind of goes through that for obviously people who might not be aware of that or might be looking at, okay, why is all this hospice things, why are all these happening? But it goes on to clarify, interestingly enough, just their seriousness in looking at likely fraudulent behavior. Okay, so they're serious in these Medicare enrolled hospices. They're looking at long length of stays. They're looking at co-located hospices, high rates of beneficiaries who are discharged alive. There are 4 states. So we know in July 2023, CMS implemented that provisional period of enhanced oversight for newly Medicare enrolled hospices that underwent a change in ownership, and that's Arizona, California, Nevada, and Texas. There were 122 revocations. That's a lot of agencies. So as of June 2025, 668 hospices have been subject to medical review under this period of enhanced oversight, and they have revoked the Medicare enrollment of 122 of those agencies. So following what they considered the success of this, I don't consider it a success, but yet I understand we've got to get bad players out of the market or players that don't follow the rules because they're hurting the rest of us. But following this success, CMS expanded the prepayment review to existing hospices in the same 4 states in September of 2024. So there's just a lot of information they're looking at. They're obviously conducting site visits of high-risk hospices to verify operational status and ownership, adequate staffing, and key medical record documentation. And really looking they've also implemented this rapid response team to promptly resolve any inappropriate enrollment complaints, which has also, because of this, there were 358 hospice elections that were reversed for Medicare beneficiaries And if you think about it, there's a graph on this page that has utilization. And I know you don't have this in your slides, but in 2020, there were, 1.6 million Medicare beneficiaries, okay? And in 2024, the latest utilization is 1.8. We know with the aging of America that we're going to see this number increase, but I'm very happy to see that they're moving forward in the industry, looking at palliative care, looking at that gap between what home health doesn't provide and what the patient may need who is not eligible for hospice any longer. So just interesting to think about all that. So on this next page, I've just given you the link. CMS has a whole page dedicated to the HOPE. And so lots of great information, lots of things to look at. And so I hope this is at least, if nothing else, piqued your curiosity, giving you a little more, a couple of things to think about. So I'll turn it back over to Jan and see if we have any, we have a couple of minutes for questions. If you don't feel like asking a question out loud, send that in to Jan and we'll get that answered for you.
Thanks so much, Nanette. Yes, folks, if you have questions, please do send them in. You can add them in the chat box. And while we're giving folks an opportunity to ask some questions, I am going to quickly launch a poll just to see what you all are thinking about the HOPE tool. So here goes. We're wondering, what's your biggest concern about the Hospice HOPE tool? And the options we have, the answers are additional time required to complete, ensuring the accuracy of data collection, ensuring timely submission, the impact of data on future payment refinements, or something else. And I can see folks are voting. So I'm going to give that a few seconds to let folks get their responses in there. And so far, we have not received any questions. I'm sure folks, sometimes it's that thing, you need to dig into it a little bit before you can formulate those questions. Okay, it looks like voting is slowing down. So I'm going to close the poll. Oh, I've got a few more folks voting here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and we'll take a look at the results. So here we go. All right, so we have the majority of folks are concerned about accuracy of the data collection. And then we kind of have, for second place, a bit of a tie between ensuring timely submission and impact of data on future payment refinement. Nanette, any thoughts about that? Obviously, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because and that's what I love about my hospice folks is that they want to do it right.
Right.
And so that's the biggest concern is, accurate, timely, how that is going to affect the payment, because obviously that affects their ability to care for patients. Yes, we know it's going to take additional time, but the biggest concern is that accuracy. And so I love, that just really proves that we're going to move in the right direction if that's what we're thinking.
Completely. Thanks, Nanette, and thanks everybody for giving us those responses to discuss. All right. Well, we're going to move on to our scenario spotlight for this episode. Oh, let's see. We did get a question come in. Any reason why the HOPE tool isn't due at recertification? One of our listeners is wondering. Any thoughts on that, Nanette?
Sure. Yeah, and that's an interesting thought for sure. And I honestly feel like they're just baby stepping their way here. I would expect in the future to see that added on. But I think they want to look at this initial data collection. What does this look like for this period of time? So yeah, I don't have a reason why. it would make sense that they would do that. But the other thing, just thinking through this, because a face-to-face is not required until the beginning of the third benefit, part of that third benefit period, I'm wondering, if and when they do that, will they do that at the first 90, or will they make that align with, what it looks like as far as that that third benefit, going into the third benefit period, into those 60-day episodes. So anyway, it'll be interesting for sure. Good question.
Sure. So that's something that can kind of grow and evolve basically as time goes on.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. Thanks for that question. All right. Yeah, so let's move on to our scenario spotlight. Just real quick, last month we had a scenario that dealt with a situation where an 84-year-old female patient with severe vascular dementia with agitation was being referred to home health. And we were asking you for the diagnosis coding as well as answers to some OASIS responses. And I'll just quickly go over the answers to that scenario. The coding that's suggested for this patient is to list the vascular dementia severe with agitation first, followed by mild protein calorie malnutrition, anorexia, repeated falls, and history of falling. And the rationale for that is that you no longer need to know the underlying etiology for vascular dementia in order to code it as primary. And because the FO1 dementia codes have PDGM classification for home health, and they've been removed from the attachment A exclusion list for hospice claims processing. If you do know the etiology, you should code it, but if all you have is vascular dementia, you can use it as primary now for both home care and hospice. And for the OASIS responses for this patient, we're focusing on the eating, showering, and bathing, and the chair, bed to chair transfer items. For all of those GG items, this patient would be automatically coded as dependent because it takes 2 caregivers to assist. So all of those GG items would be 0-1, but the M items vary thanks to the different scoring for those M items. For eating, M1870, this patient would score as a 2 because the patient doesn't have a feeding tube or TPN, so 2 is the highest score possible for M1870. For M1830 bathing, this patient would be a 6 because it's indicated that this patient is independent for ADLs with poor safety awareness. And for transferring, this patient would score a 3, unable to transfer self and is unable to bear weight or pivot when transferred by another person. And this is the case because the patient is unaware of safety, severe dementia requiring 100% direction and assist of the helper. Even though the patient is able to bear weight, she would be unable to pivot safely without guidance or direction from the helper due to the cognitive deficits that she has. And our scenario for June surrounds a patient who has been hospitalized for bowel obstruction coming to home health. And this is another scenario that centers around some of the OASIS eating items. So take a look at that scenario in your handouts, and we will share the answer for it next episode. And now I have a quick product spotlight for you. We want to remind you about Decision Health's 2025 Home Health Payment and Compliance Virtual Summit that's happening online September 9th and 10th. And if you're interested in learning more about the HOPE tool, Nanette will be doing a longer session where she'll be able to dig into more detail on this topic during the summit. Plus, you'll gain other expert insight and actionable strategies to help your agency succeed. The speakers will be covering the latest changes to coding, OASIS, home health value-based purchasing, and medical review, survey preparedness, and more. You can follow the link in your handout for more information and to register. And we also have a What's New with OC for you, and this is where we share updates from the Association of Home Care Coding and Compliance. If you're an AHC member, we want to let you know about some new opportunities to earn CEUs. You can earn CEUs by writing coding or OASIS scenarios, summaries of AHC Talk episodes, tools for the AHC tool library, or posts for the AHC blog. There's a link in the handouts that you can click through and find out more information about that as well. And if you're listening to a podcast version of the show, you'll be able to find the handouts on the AHC website along with the recording under resources, free webinars. We hope you enjoyed this episode of AHC Talk. Thanks again, Nanette, for all the great information, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We hope you'll join us again for our August call when Lisa McClammy will be sharing recent OASIS updates. And in the meantime, if you'd like to re-listen to this episode or to a previous one on the go, you can find AHC Talk on your favorite podcast app. Or you can also listen to the recording and access the handouts on the AHC website at ahc.decisionhealth.com. And if you have any suggestions for future guests, topics, or ideas about the format of the show, please send me an email at jan.milliman@decisionhealth.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next month. Take care.